1 Samuel this morning. 1 Samuel and chapter number 15. Thank you. Appreciate it. 1 Samuel and chapter number 15. We're going to read just the first three verses, and we're going to look at this. The title of the message this morning is, I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek. We're going to look at Amalek, and we won't understand what God is doing in these first three verses of chapter 15 if we don't look at a couple of other passages as well. And so we're going to read these three verses, and then we're going to go over to Exodus chapter 17. And so right here, 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse number 1, it says, Samuel also said unto Saul, the Lord sent me to anoint thee to be king over his people, over Israel. Now therefore hearken thou unto the voice of the words of the Lord. And so he's telling Saul, listen, do exactly what the Lord is telling you to do. And in verse 2 and 3, we're told what the Lord has said. Here's what the Lord has said for Saul to do. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel. Now that's very important. Catch that word, remember. And what Amalek did to Israel. God is remembering what a country called Amalek has done to God's nation, Israel. How he laid wait for him in the way when he came up from Egypt. Now this is talking about when Moses brought the people out of Egypt. So God's remembering something that's happened many years before. He tells him in verse 3, now go and smite Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have. Did you catch that? All that they have. And spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling. In case you were wondering what God meant by all, he meant all of them. Ox and sheep, camel and ass. It's not just enough to kill all of the people of Amalek. You kill everything that they own, all their livestock, everything. You completely and utterly destroy them off the face of the earth. That is what God has told King Saul to do to a nation called Amalek. And so if this is where you jump in and you don't know what the background is here, honestly, we'll go, wow, that's pretty cruel. God is being pretty brutal, we would say. We would say that's incredibly brutal. We tend to look at women and we tend to go, wow, there's some innocence there. We tend to look at the civilian population and we tend to go, there's some innocence there. A lot of times what we don't even really stop and think about is a lot of times it's been women who have actually influenced some of the worst murderers in history, believe it or not. A lot of times it's been a mother that's influenced that boy who grew up to be a murderous man. Oftentimes there's an evil woman behind that man. I think an example of this over in the book of Judges. There's a general called, I believe his name is Sisera, if I remember correctly. He was a Syrian, and Deborah and Barak went up and they fought him and they defeated him. And when Sisera's chariot came back home without Sisera in it, his mother was standing at the window and watching, and she was going, where's my son? Has he not conquered other people? Has he not pillaged other people? And she even went in, I think, in some detail. Did he not take the women as captives from the other nation? His mother understood all of that and was good with it. And so we tend to look at women, we tend to go, wow, they're in it. Here's the thing. If you have an evil civilization like Amalek, you can't just kill the men. You have to absolutely wipe them off the map. or their evil will continue to exist. Their evil theologies will continue to exist. See, this is why, and I'm not trying to get off track. We're going to get back onto what's being meant here. But this is why it doesn't do any good to go over to Iraq and fight a war and then set up a democracy. It does absolutely no good, because their problem is not their government. Their problem is their religion. Their problem is they are Muslims. And it doesn't matter what kind of government you set up. That's why it was doomed to fail from the very beginning. As long as we were looking, even then looking for terrorists. If you don't wipe out all of them, you're going to have more terrorists. It doesn't really do any good. And here's the thing, that's something God knows. He's aware of that. It may seem very brutal to us. But here's the thing, that infant grows up. This is actually pretty, believe it or not, in a way, merciful. These infants would have went instantly to heaven. You let these infants grow up, they will not. These infants will grow up and they will become men and women, and they will become mean and evil and not want anything to do with the genuine God. This was actually very merciful, believe it or not. We read it and we go, wow, how brutal. I'm reading a biography right now that it's very interesting. It's 640 pages. I've never wanted to sit down and read a biography of this size. But I was telling you, I learned about Audible. And the app Audible, it'll read to you. And I'm reading this biography about a guy named Stonewall Jackson. I've always wanted to know more about him. I've wanted to know more about what made him the man he was. What made him the military leader that he was. I've always wanted to know more. You know, what was his childhood like? What was he like as a husband? Was he a father? You know, I wanted to learn things like that. And come to find out, he's actually a pretty exceptional man in every area of his life. He was an excellent husband and an excellent dad. And I found that to be wonderful. But I was reading about this, and when the war broke out, he went to his superiors and he told them, he said, look, we're going to have to invade the enemy territory, and we're going to have to destroy everything in our path. And they thought he was nuts. They thought he was crazy. He said, we're going to have to blow up buildings that make weapons. We're going to have to blow up. We're going to have to destroy every railroad we run into. We're going to have to absolutely burn cities to the ground. He said, if you don't do that, we will lose. Period. And everybody thought he was crazy. He was actually right on. Because later on, when the North invaded and they wound up winning, guess how they did it? They burned everything in their path. It's called scorched earth. They burned everything in their path. You burn every crop you run into. You basically just destroy the enemy completely. You make them not want to fight anymore. And he understood that way ahead of time. Do you realize God understands things that we don't? And we read this, and I had a person one time tell me this is why they can't believe in the God of the Bible, because of stuff like this where he told them to wipe out the whole nation of Amalek. You don't understand the nation of Amalek. The nation of Amalek was an absolutely wicked nation. The nation of Amalek would have done worse to the Israelites. Could they have done it? If they could have got their hands on the Israelites, they would have done much worse than this. This was actually pretty merciful, believe it or not. It actually has a bigger picture than that. Let's go back to Exodus chapter 17 and look at what this is actually picturing. Look at what Amalek did. It says in Exodus chapter 17, verse number 1, and all the congregation of the children of Israel journeyed from the wilderness of Sin after their journeys, according to the commandment of the Lord, and pitched in Rephidim. They pitched their tents. They set up their tents there. They made camp. And there was no water for the people to drink. So they're thirsty. Anytime Moses is moving, estimates put it at probably around 1.2 million people. It's somewhere in that neighborhood. Can you imagine having to find water for 1 million people in a desert? That's quite a problem, isn't it? These people are thirsty. It says in verse 2, wherefore the people did chide with Moses and said, give us water that we may drink. And Moses said unto them, why chide ye with me? Wherefore do you tempt the Lord? And the people thirsted there for water, and the people murmured against Moses and said, wherefore is this that thou hast brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst. Verse 4, and Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, what shall I do unto this people? They be almost ready to stone me. And the Lord said unto Moses, go on before the people, and take with thee of the elders of Israel, and thy rod wherewith thou smotest the river, take in thine hand, and go. So now he's telling Moses, grab your rod and the elders of Israel, and go. Verse 6, behold, this is what God says, I will stand before thee there upon the rock in Horeb. And thou shalt smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. So he did it. And he called the name of the place Massah and Meribah, because of the chiding of the children of Israel, and because they tempted the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? Now, we haven't got to Amalek yet. There's a reason we haven't. I wanted to cover this first. Now, in verse 6, it's very important. God said, I will stand before thee there upon the rock in Horeb. Thou shalt smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, that the people may drink. The picture is this. The Trinity is right there in verse 6. God the Father is going to stand on the rock, which is Jesus. The rock is going to be smitten, and water will pour out. That's the Holy Spirit. And you have the Trinity right here. It's amazing the amount that goes into this. The rock, Jesus is the rock. And he's the one that's going to be smitten for our sins one day. And God the Father is going to be the one that does it. And he's standing there, and the rock is smitten, and water. Remember when they stabbed Jesus' side? Literally, water poured out of his side. But the water here is a picture of the Holy Spirit. And it says, and Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. This is actually a picture of salvation. When we place our faith and trust in Jesus Christ, we get to drink of that living water that he promised that woman at the well. And so it's amazing what's going on here. It's a picture of salvation. And so, and we have the Trinity. It's absolutely wonderful what's going on here. Verse 8. Then came Amalek and fought with Israel in Rephidim. Immediately, after a picture of salvation, this wonderful ordeal where Moses strikes the rock and water comes out of the rock. We're in Exodus chapter 17 if you're just joining us. It's amazing. Right after that, Amalek strikes. Verse 9, and Moses said unto Joshua, choose us out men and go out fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in mine hand. So Joshua did as Moses had said to him and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And it came to pass when Moses held up his hand that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. And a whole bunch of stuff going on and all of that as well. But Moses' hands were heavy, and they took a stone, put it under him, and he sat thereon. And Aaron and Hur stayed up his hands, the one on the one side and the other on the other side, and his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua discomfited, that means he was defeating Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Now, verse 14. And the Lord said unto Moses, write this for a memorial in a book. In other words, I'm going to remember this. That's what a memorial is. It's a memory. Write this for a memorial in a book. You remember what he told Samuel? I remember what Amalek did. I remember what they did. Write this for a memorial in a book and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua. For I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. If you're going to put out the remembrance of a whole people, you're going to have actually wind up killing the women and children. You can't if they exist. You understand why he had to do that later on. He made a promise. I'm going to wipe Amalek off the map because of what they've done right here. I'm going to wipe. That's what God is saying. I will utterly put out the remembrance. You're not even going to remember these people when I'm done with them. They're going to be gone. And it was because they attacked Israel. See, I think a lot of Americans think that those of us who are pro-Israel, I think a lot of Christians think that Christians who are pro-Israel think we're paranoid. We are not paranoid. Don't touch Israel. If you want to see how serious it is, look at what he was willing to do to Amalek. I will bless them that bless thee, and I will curse them that curse thee. He told Abraham that. We're not being paranoid about being friendly with Israel and about supporting Israel. There's no paranoia. We believe in God, and we believe He is protecting Israel. Look at verse 15. It says, and Moses built an altar and called the name of it Jehovah Nissi, which means the Lord our, let's see, I wrote it down. Hold on. The Lord is our banner. In other words, the Lord's going to fight for us. Moses would write him, the Lord's going to do our fighting for us. He is our banner. And verse 16, for he said, because the Lord hath sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. God declared war on Amalek. Later on, where we are in 1 Samuel, he's saying, Saul, I want you to be my instrument of war. I have this war going on with Amalek. I need you to go out and wipe them completely out. Now, if you know the rest of the story, and we'll get into that, Lord willing, next time we're in 1 Samuel 15, Saul doesn't do that. That's another story for another time. Saul doesn't do it, and it costs him his kingdom. And it ends very badly for Saul. And there's a picture in there for us too. Amalek, literally, this was a deal between Amalek and Israel, but I want you to understand, Amalek's a picture of our flesh. That's really what he's a picture of. A person gets saved at the rock being smitten. A person gets saved and they drink of that living water. What's the first thing that starts hindering you after that? Your flesh. It's our flesh. It's the first thing that starts. This is why so many people struggle with, man, am I really saved? Yeah, you are, and you have a real flesh. And you really got forgiven of your sins, and you've really been born again, and you've really been cleansed, and you've really received the living water. You really have. But after that, your flesh is going to flare up. It didn't go away. Your flesh is still there. In fact, it's at that moment it will attack. It will pick that moment when you've had a spiritual victory and you're on that spiritual high. The flesh will then pick that moment to strike you. And understand this, when Amalek attacked them, guess where he attacked them? In the rear. Where the women and children were. Where the livestock were. That's where you're weak. I was reading about a great victory that Stonewall Jackson had. One of the best ones he had. Guess who he attacked? The weak. The weak point of the other army. Their supply train, their supply wagons with very little guard. And he just destroyed them, raided down, murder. In fact, one of his men looked at him and said, "Sir, should we stop?" He said, "No, let them do it. We have to do it." Amalek attacked them at their weak point. He hit them in their women and children. Your flesh will attack you in your weak point. It will hit you at your weakest place. It knows to do it. Guess what? The Lord is at war with our flesh. From generation to generation. Write this for a memorial in a book. And rehearse it in the ears of Joshua. I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Do you realize one day He's going to put out the remembrance of our flesh from under heaven forever? Our flesh is going to end. Our battle between the spirit and the flesh is going to end one day. God wins in the end. He said, and that's why it's very important to remember verse 15, Jehovah Nissi. The Lord is our banner. The flesh is not our banner. We're not to even fight these battles in the flesh. We're to fight these battles in the Spirit. In verse 16, the Lord hath sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. There's coming a day the Lord is going to absolutely put away all flesh. And this war will end. See, He's not going to be like King Saul. He's not going to let it keep living. This is why it's very important. This explains a lot to us saved people. We still face physical troubles. That's why we still get sick. That's why we still get hurt. This is why I don't go out here and have a car wreck, because I'm saved and obviously the Lord's going to protect me and I'll live through it. Now that's a little bit of a foolhardy way to view it. Now if I just happen to be in a wreck, I'm trying to trust the Lord that He's going to preserve me through it. But if I go out here and decide to wrap my car around a tree because that's absolutely foolish. I still have a flesh that's still mortal. It's still able to die. This explains why we saved people still face physical troubles and pain and even ultimately death. One day we will face it. If the Lord tarries His coming, it is appointed unto man once to die. And after this, the judgment. The Lord is at war with Amalek. But also, this is also a picture of the lost versus the saved. In the same way that God had to deal with Amalek, in the same way that He'll have to deal with every Christian's flesh ultimately, He's going to have to deal with the lost of this world. That's why one day judgment's coming to this earth completely. Think of, let's turn over to 2 Peter, chapter number 3. 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 3. The Bible says, knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lusts, and saying, where is the promise of His coming? Where's Jesus? He said He was coming, where's He at? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation. For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, so first of all, they're ignorant of the creation. They want to be ignorant that we've been created. Think about our day. No one believes we've been created. Most people believe in evolution. Most people believe in Big Bang Theory. They don't want to remember the Creator. They also don't want to remember that He has the right to judge His creation. Verse 6, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. They don't want to remember the great flood. In fact, anytime you ever bring that up in conversation with people, God flooded the whole earth. Really, did He? Did He really do that? They don't want to remember that, because He still has the right to judge them now. It says in verse 8, but beloved, be not ignorant. Let's read verse 7. But the heavens and the earth, which are now, by the same word, are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition, get this, of ungodly men, of lost people. One day He's going to have to absolutely do away with it. See, one day He's going to have to absolutely do away with sin. You know how you do away with sin? You have to do away with the sinner. That's the way you stop sin. If you want to stop a weed, you have to pull it up from the root. You can't let it exist. There's coming a day He's going to have to wipe. He's going to have to basically stop humanity, like He was going to have to wipe out Amalek. One day He's going to have to wipe out every lost person if He's ever going to do away with sin. It'll have to come to an end. That's the point. One day it will have to come to an end. Verse 8. But beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day. The Lord is not slack concerning His promise. The promise of Jesus coming back. The promise of this judgment of Amalek. The promise of this judgment of the world. He's not slack concerning that, as some men count slackness, but is long-suffering to usward. He's patient, not willing that any should perish. He's putting it off because He wants people to get saved, but that all should come to repentance. It says, but the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night. We won't be looking for it. In which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat, The earth also with the works that are therein shall be burned up. You realize that's Amalek, that's everything that's all the flesh that exists, that's everything that he owns. That's all the cattle, that's all the sheep, that's all the oxen, that's everything. That's all the works in the earth, that's everything. That's every building in New York City is going to be burned up. That's every building in London is gone. That's every building in China is gone. That's everything gone. It's Amalek. And God ultimately wins that war. And flesh will cease. We can't live through that. When He actually lets that happen, we can't live through that. I think this is after the tribulation. I don't even think this is talking about the tribulation. I mean, there's going to be a tribulation of warfare on this earth, and at the end of that, He's going to set up His 1,000-year reign of Christ, and everything's going to be great. And then it says, the devil will be loosed for a little time, for a little season. It doesn't tell us how long. Then the devil's going to lead one final revolt, and then God says, enough! And it's over. And He's going to burn everything up. It says in verse 11, Peter says this, with that in mind, seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought ye to be? In all holy conversation and godliness. In all holy lifestyle and godliness. This isn't one of those things where we get to go, well, this is all going to be over with one day. I get to go sit under a tree. I get to put everything on cruise control. I'm done. No. He says, think about your holy lifestyle. Think about who you are as a Christian. He said, yeah, the Lord's going to do away with all the lost one day. He is. But until then, what are you doing about it? That's what Peter's telling us. He's writing to Christians here. He's saying, yeah, the Lord's going to do away with the lost one day. He's going to do away with all flesh. But until He does that, you've got a job to do. Verse 12. Looking for and hasting unto the coming of the day of God, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. Nevertheless, we, according to His promise, look for new heavens and a new earth, wherein dwelleth righteousness. There ain't going to be there's no lost flesh in that area. There's no Amalek there. Amalek's gone by that time. Verse 14, wherefore, beloved, seeing that ye look for such things, be diligent, that ye may be found of Him in peace, without spot and blameless. Be diligent in your walk with the Lord until that time. And account that the long-suffering of our Lord is salvation. Why is He putting it off? Because He wants people to get saved. Why is He putting it off? Because He cares. Why is He putting it off? He's not in a hurry to do this. Oh, He remembers what Amalek has done. It's many years later. I didn't add up the exact amount of years, but from Moses to King Saul, that's quite a few years. It's like He put it off for a while. Did you notice that? The long-suffering of the Lord is salvation. Account that the long-suffering of the Lord is salvation, even as our beloved brother Paul, also according to the wisdom given unto him, hath written unto you, as also in all his epistles, speaking in them of these things, in which are some things hard to be understood. This is hard to understand. This is difficult. Which they that are unlearned and unstable wrestle with this, as they do also the other scriptures unto their own destruction. Remember that person I told you about? They said, I could never serve a God that wanted to wipe out all those people. Yeah, you're wrestling with that scripture, and you're wrestling with it unto your own destruction. You better just trust Him that He knows what He's doing. You better just trust God that He loves us more than we love ourselves. We better just trust God and be careful questioning what He's doing. We can read that passage in Samuel where He wants to destroy all of Amalek, and we can go, wow, what a brutal God. Be careful. He knows what He's doing. We don't. We better trust Him. Verse 17, ye therefore, beloved, seeing ye know these things before, beware lest ye also, being led away with the error of the wicked, fall from your own steadfastness. That's a warning for us. We can fall from our own steadfastness It's not talking about losing your salvation. It's talking about being a solid Christian. We can fall from that. We'll be led away with the error of the wicked. Grow in grace instead, and in the knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. To Him be glory both now and forever. Amen. What's our part in all this, in light of all this picture of Amalek? First of all, just trust God. He knows exactly what He's doing. I can look at the world, I look at the lost people, I look at my own life, and I look at everything. It's overwhelming. Just trust God. Know that it is all in His hands. He knows what He's doing with Amalek. He does. He's remembering all of it. He knows what He's doing with Amalek. He knows what He's doing with our flesh. He knows what He's doing with every single person on this planet. With His help, this is secondly, with His help, fight your flesh. Did you notice every time Moses would take his hand down, they'd lose the battle with Amalek? It's a picture of prayer. But then Moses needed some help, and Aaron and Hur came and propped his hands up, and the prayers kept going up, and while the prayers are going up, Joshua's having victory over Amalek. You're having victory over your flesh. Fight your flesh with God's help. This is why it's impossible to have any victory over our life without Jesus. It's impossible to have any real victory, because He's the one that gives it. With God's help, fight your flesh in prayer and in the Word of God. It's worth doing because in the end, this is my last point, in the end, think about Sodom and Gomorrah. Why did God destroy Sodom and Gomorrah? Because He couldn't find 10 righteous. Be one of the 10 righteous. It's worth doing. Righteous meaning saved, but also a practical righteous. You're living righteously also. Be among the 10 righteous. Even if no one else is interested in this. I hope every person in Idaho gets saved. I hope every person in McCurtain County gets saved. I hope every person in the state of Oklahoma gets saved. I hope every American gets saved. I hope every North American, South American, African, European, Asian, I hope everybody, even if there's somebody on Antarctica, I hope they get saved. Until then, you do your part. You fight your flesh. And now I'm talking to Christians now. If you're lost, your first part is get saved. Your first part is drink of that water that came from that rock. That living water. And second of all, as a Christian, get to fighting your flesh. Be among the 10 righteous. Let's close in a word of prayer this morning. Heavenly Father, Lord, I want to lift up everyone that's here this morning and even those that weren't able to come this morning. Lord, I hope that this message was clear. Lord, if there's someone listening to this message that isn't saved, I pray, dear Lord, they'll drink of that living water. I pray that they'll receive Jesus Christ as their personal Savior and receive the forgiveness of their sins. Because all of us have an Amalek. All of us have a flesh. We've all sinned and come short of the glory of God. Heavenly Father, for those of us who are saved, I pray that you would impart to us the importance of battling our flesh. Our God is at war with Amalek. I pray, dear Lord, that you'll help that to be important to us as well. Help us to want to be among the 10 righteous. Help us to want to be the salt that's preserving this world. Lord, I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.